Right, let's talk about the stock market. Imagine a giant, chaotic farmer's market. But instead of buying suspiciously large zucchinis, people are buying tiny little pieces of companies. These pieces are called stocks. If you buy a stock in, say, Apple, you're not just buying a phone that will stop working the day after the warranty expires. You're buying a tiny slice of the company itself. If Apple does well and makes a mountain of money, the value of your tiny slice goes up. If it suddenly announces its next product is a sentient toaster that only makes burnt toast, your slice becomes worth less. It's a massive global system of betting on which companies will succeed and which will fail spectacularly. Now you might be thinking, John, this sounds like glorified gambling for people in suits, and I'm busy trying to figure out TikTok dances. Why should I care? And that is a fair point. But here's the thing. The stock market is deeply, frighteningly connected to almost everything. Many people's retirement savings, the funds that are supposed to let them live out their golden years, not eating cat food, are invested in the stock market. The health of the stock market can influence whether companies decide to hire more people or, fire everyone via a company-wide Zoom call. It's like the weather. You might not be a meteorologist, but you're still going to get wet if it starts pouring. So when the market is up, it generally means investors are optimistic, companies are growing, and the economy feels healthy, like a bodybuilder flexing in a mirror. But when it's down, it means the opposite. Fear is in the air, money is being lost, and the whole economic machine starts to sputter and cough like a 1982 Ford Fiesta. The stock market is essentially the world's mood ring for money, and in 2008, that mood ring turned a very, very dark shade of, oh God, we're all completely screwed. It's an indicator of economic health that has the power to affect your life, even if you never buy a single stock. And it's not just stocks. There's also something called the bond market. Think of it this way. If buying a stock is like becoming a part owner of a business, buying a bond is like loaning that business money. You give them, say, $100, and they promise to pay you back in a few years with a little extra cash on top, known as interest. It's supposed to be the safer, more boring cousin of the stock market. It's the sensible sedan to the stock market's flashy, unreliable sports car. The problem, as we'll see, is that in the lead-up to 2008, people found a way to make even the boring, sensible sedan explode. So how did this whole mess start? With something wonderful, the dream of owning a home. For years, the idea was that buying a house was the safest investment you could make. It was as reliable as the sun rising or a politician breaking a promise. This belief created what's called a housing bubble. Imagine everyone suddenly decides that Beanie Babies are worth millions. People start buying them like crazy, which drives the price up, which makes more people want to buy them. That's a bubble. In the 2000s, this happened with houses. Prices were going up, 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 and everyone assumed they'd never come down. This housing frenzy was fueled by cheap and easy loans. Banks were practically throwing money at people saying, you want a house, you get a house. You want a second house you can't afford? Here's the money. They created something called a subprime mortgage. This is a fancy term for a very risky loan given to someone who might not be able to pay it back. It's the financial equivalent of giving a toddler the keys to a Lamborghini and a Red Bull. What could possibly go wrong? For a while, it seemed like nothing. As long as house prices kept rising, even if someone couldn't pay, the bank could just take the house and sell it for a profit. But here's where it gets truly diabolically complicated. The banks didn't just hold on to these risky loans. Oh no, that would be far too simple. Instead, they bundled thousands of them together, the good, the bad, and the truly awful, into a sort of financial sausage called a mortgage-backed security, or MBS. They then chopped up this sausage and sold slices of it to investors all over the world. These investors, including other banks and pension funds, thought they were buying a safe, reliable product. After all, they were told these were as safe as houses. It was a bit like making a smoothie out of one strawberry and a pile of dirt and telling everyone it's a healthy fruit drink. These financial products were given top safety ratings, AAA, the best you can get, by rating agencies who are supposed to be the impartial referees in this game. It turns out, these referees were being paid by the very banks whose products they were rating. This is a staggering conflict of interest, like asking a fox to rate the security of your hen house. 5 stars, the fox exclaims while licking his lips. Absolutely impenetrable. So you had a global market flooded with incredibly risky investments disguised as safe ones, all resting on the insane assumption that house prices would go up forever. It was a house of cards, built on a foundation of greed, on top of a ticking time bomb. By 2007, the party started to end. The first sign of trouble was that people with those subprime loans, who were given money they couldn't afford to repay, started to, well, not repay it. This is technically called defaulting, but you can just think of it as the moment the toddler crashes the Lamborghini. Suddenly, banks were stuck with houses they had to sell. But with so many houses for sale at once, the supply overwhelmed the demand. The housing bubble, that beautiful shimmering sphere of ever-increasing value, finally popped. And it popped loudly. When house prices started to fall, panic set in. All those financial sausages, the mortgage-backed securities that were sold as gourmet investments, were suddenly revealed to be filled with toxic junk. Their value plummeted. Now remember who bought these things? That's right, other banks, investment firms, and retirement funds all over the world. They woke up one morning to find that the billions of dollars they had invested in safe-as-houses assets were now worth less than a used tea bag. This created a massive credit crunch, which is a fancy way of saying nobody trusted anyone enough to lend them money. This is when the dominoes really started to fall, and fall hard. Banks are interconnected, like a very dysfunctional family. When one major bank starts to wobble, it can bring down others with it. In September 2008, a huge investment bank called Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old institution, went bankrupt. This was the financial equivalent of finding out that Superman isn't just mortal, but he's also terrible at managing his finances. The collapse of Lehman sent a shockwave of pure terror through the global financial system. If Lehman could fail, anyone could fail. The stock market, seeing this absolute dumpster fire raging in the banking sector, completely lost its mind. Investors, from massive hedge funds to ordinary people with retirement accounts, tried to sell everything all at once. When everyone is selling and no one is buying, prices crash. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a major stock market index, had some of the biggest single-day drops in its history. People watched in horror as their life savings evaporated in a matter of hours. The entire global economic engine, which had been humming along on a fuel of cheap credit and blind optimism, had just seized up completely. Faced with a complete meltdown of the global financial system, and I do mean complete, governments around the world had to do something. They chose to do something that was both necessary and deeply unpopular. They bailed out the banks. This meant using taxpayer money, your money, to prop up the very institutions that had caused the crisis in the first place. The logic was that letting them all fail would have been even worse, creating a second Great Depression. It was like your arsonist roommate setting the kitchen on fire and you having to pay for the damages just to have a place to live. People were, to put it mildly, furious. The immediate aftermath was brutal. The Great Recession, as it came to be known, was the most severe economic downturn since the 1930s. Millions of people around the world lost their jobs. Many lost their homes to foreclosure. Businesses, small and large, shut down. The global economy, which had become so interconnected, meant that the poison from the United States housing market spread everywhere. It was a stark reminder that in our modern world, a bad mortgage in Ohio can lead to a factory closing in Germany. The recovery was painfully slow, and for many, the economic scars from that period remain to this day. So, did we learn anything? Well, sort of. In response to the crisis, governments passed new laws to regulate the financial industry. In the United States, this was the Dodd-Frank Act. The goal was to make banks more stable, prevent them from taking on so much insane risk, and increase transparency so that no one could sell a dirt and strawberry smoothie and call it a fruit drink again. The rules aimed to ensure banks had more of their own money on hand to absorb losses, so taxpayers wouldn't be the first line of defense next time. It was a genuine attempt to put some adult supervision back into the room. But here's the kicker. The fundamental incentives that drive Wall Street haven't really changed. The pressure to generate massive profits is still there. Many of the complex financial products that caused the crisis still exist, albeit in slightly different forms. And over time, there has been a consistent push to weaken or roll back the very regulations that were put in place to prevent another disaster. The lesson of 2008 is a sobering one. It showed us how fragile our economic system is, how quickly greed can overwhelm common sense, and how important it is to remain vigilant. Because if we forget how it happened, we are absolutely doomed to watch a sequel.